Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Finally, with a cleaned up studio coming back to you once again. And we're starting today's episode with something completely unexpected. Another strike on the Tuapse, fourth time in the last 2 weeks. Ukraine is continuing hammering down on the Tuapse oil refinery. Every time Russians think that they finally quelled the damage done to this big refinery and oil terminal right on the coastline of Black Sea, the terminal that is being used specifically to export whatever oil Russia is having, and it's now being hammered more and more and more and more. Now, Oko Horror, thank you so much for the analysis. Here he indicates types of damages. Now, highlighted, he only has the storage facilities. He doesn't take into account all of the pumping or refining stations, but at least on the storage parts that are highlighted, we can see that about 50% of this facility has now been confirmed taken out. But what is more fascinating for me is not the fact that Ukraine is striking targets inside Russia, is that there is now big campaign to hide any consequences of these strikes. A lot of the Russian channels in media and the television channels are reporting that Tuapse, whatever strikes are happening there, are actually very, very mild. And because Tuapse is also a big touristy region, they're still encouraging the tourism to go on as planned, where despite the fact that there is literally oil coming down from the skies. But I want to give you a couple of examples of what kind of a downplaying campaign has been going on. For example, here you can see Romanov Light, Kremlin-associated Z propagandists, have been talking about the strikes on the Tuapse and so on, but I want to specifically point on this part. Now, it is translated by Google Translate, so it's not the most precise translation in the world, but you can see that he talks that earlier the attack on the oil refinery was carried out by kamikaze wrecks of Ukrainian armed forces. What he was telling about is that there was a strike that was done on the Tuapse oil refinery by the debris of drones that was, yet he worded it in such a way that just the strike itself was conducted by the debris. Like he's twisting himself in such pretzels to state the obvious that there is just Ukrainians destroying the oil refining facility of Russia. Or as another example right here, the Logic of Markov channel, where he talks about the strikes and downplays everything, stating a huge number of photos and videos of black smoke from the fire in Tuapse from the attacks of Ukrainian armed forces, even from the airplane. Not just from airplane, we actually saw images literally from space. The fire in Tuapse is so big that it is visible from the space satellites. And what he says is, I understand that the scale of smoke is amazing, but I would suggest that people be calmer, and by publishing numerous photos and videos smoke over Tuapse, there is no need to nightmare people to scare them, because these photos and videos create false impressions about the enormous scale of the Ukrainian armed forces strikes in Tuapse. But it's not grandiose. Don't worry about this. Like, we saw the spills of oil into the sea. We saw the rains of literal oil going down on people's cars. Don't pay attention to this. It's fine. Just a regular old Friday for Russia. Don't worry about it too much. But I think the absolute cherry on the cake takes the exclusive interview of the governor of the Krasnodar region about the situation in Tuapse. So it's the government of the region where this specific city is located. And it is just priceless gold. So what he says is this: we call this the oil drop effect. When our guys shoot down a target, this fuel oil is sprayed and burns on the ground. A picture is created of as if something serious is burning, but in reality, the remains of enemy fuel are simply burning out. These are all pathetic attempts at wishful thinking. There are no serious arrivals like by the drones. I tell you this officially. And if there are some sources of smoke and local fire, it is solely due to the fall of debris from destroyed devices and their subsequent uncontrolled detonation upon impact with the ground. Listen, destruction of life support facilities, there is zero. According to the Ministry of Defense, all targets were shut down. Yes, debris are falling, there may be some local grass fires, but our services respond instantly. The main thing, the economy is working. Factories are working, there is electricity and water in the houses. This is the best response to any provocations. We will not allow any usual rhythm of life in our region to be disrupted. I mean, I can only just slow clap to this because this is truly the nothing to see here meme materialized in reality. But the damages for Russians are not stopping. Russians are also reporting that in Chelyabinsk region, some 1,500 kilometers from the front line with Ukraine, big distance away from Ukraine, the airfield just got struck, and the Ukrainian armed forces, specifically Magyar unmanned system forces, are reporting that they have been taking out 4 enemy planes. The 2 Su-57s, 1 Su-34, and another unknown plane that was taken out or damaged on this airfield that is located over 1,500 kilometers from Ukrainian border. Ukrainian strikes are becoming deeper and deeper and deeper. And I have been stating that this is going to get worse and worse and worse for Russia. And not only the fact that they are just trying to dismiss anything that Ukraine is doing, but more importantly, the challenging abilities of Russia of these arrivals, as they are claiming, is minimal. For example, this report from Crimea. From 1735 to 1805, there was 6 explosions at the Belbek airfield in Crimea. The sounds were similar to the arrival of drones. And important, at the same time, there were no sounds of the Russian anti-air systems working or shooting in principle. So what they're stating here is that despite the fact that there was explosions and sounds of drones working on the airfield, there was literally no anti-air working to intercept these drones, like there is no possibility to defend this airfield whatsoever. That is a very telling situation for the Russian armed forces. And that is why I'm telling you, it's gonna be really bad for Russia in 2026. And everyone is talking about the tides turning. And to illustrate this, I will show you first the post from the Russian Z propagandist that really wants to destroy Ukraine, and then we're going to turn towards Ukrainian side. And the Russians here, I mean, the translation here is pretty bad. So what he was actually stating is that Russia just seemingly cannot really go on fighting the war of attrition, that their tactics and changing nature of the battlefield is not something that they can keep up. They're stating that they are still trying to use the same old tactics and just use the mass and resources that they're having to fight against Ukraine, and that this type of warfare is pretty much a dead end for the Russian armed forces. But more importantly, I want to draw your attention to this post by the Telegram channel with the name Officer. This is from a Ukrainian soldier who has been pretty critical about Ukrainian performance and evaluation of Ukrainian performance, that it was a bit too positive for the actual situation at the front line. And this is what this critical person is actually telling you right now. He's stating, the position of the parties is gradually changing. What he feels like. I will be careful because premature praises of myself does not bring anything good. But recently, looking at the trend of hostilities in my own and most other directions, I am beginning to allow the possibility somewhat far away that the enemy is about to break down somewhere. And the same will come if no turning point. I really don't believe in a turning point. The war is also changing. Because in 2026, to a greater extent, the situation is assessed not only by the presence of an infantryman on the territory, but even 20 to 15 to 20 kilometers from the contact line, by the possibility of inflicting the damage by drones on logistical routes and enemy concentrations. Over the past 2 months, the pace of the enemy's advance has fallen significantly, and in most directions they are completely absent. It is impossible to use any armored vehicles in offensive actions. It is not even there for such things, to be honest. The only resource at the expense of which they still have is manpower, which they do not even count and continue to treat it carelessly as possible. And this has been going on for too long, which is gradually beginning to limit their freedom of action. The ratio of losses can no longer be even measured. They are simply colossal for the enemy. For our 3 fallen soldiers, there are about 50 rammed Russians, and this is exclusively confirmed by the means of objective control, because Ukraine has enforced this requirement in their armed forces to have basically the second drone filming any kind of damage dealt to the enemy. I hope that the tactics of actions that just you send the enemy forces towards Ukrainian positions, and then hopefully Ukrainians will just break down and we gain territory, or how he describes here on stupid, it's just a phraseologism here, that this will continue in them because this is very profitable for us. So even the people that were critical about situation on the front line are now stating with a lot of very careful layered words. You saw here in the first part, he has been basically stating like, please, 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 please don't be too optimistic. But so again, even situation assessment from the front lines where things are the hardest are stating that it is not going well for Russia. And it is our job to make sure that Russia is continuing getting worse and worse. So we are having a fundraiser that you must participate in, because this is how we are supporting Ukraine. Join the fundraiser. We are doing fantastical job. We are more than halfway there. So let's try to do as much as we can and hopefully close out this fundraiser as soon as possible. Thank you to everyone that has already participated and will participate even more. I have been discussing the influence that United States has on war in Ukraine for a while now. And I have been telling that Trump's appeasal of Putin is a road to nowhere, and that, to be honest, US doesn't really have any leverage on Ukraine. And if beforehand we would have a lot of these activities from Ukrainian side, trying to figure out what the Trump has been talking with Putin with, trying to do action, then now even the Western media, such as here The Atlantic, also I believe the New York Times or the New York Post, one of those, have been also making an article stating that Ukraine basically just shrugged at the reports that Trump has spoken with Putin, and Trump coming up with the same old statements that the deal is about to happen, which it's obviously not. Right now, even the mainstream media is finally acknowledging that US has pretty much no leverage if they want to pressure Ukraine into surrendering. The only correct way of action is to put pressure on Russia, because it's clear that they are the losing party. And to close up, 2 of the most important topics about Ukraine. Ukraine has the ability to fight Russia. We all know that. I think now by this point, it's not even a discussion. And I always was underscoring that the biggest enemy of Ukraine is what is happening inside Ukraine. And the first one was what is there with the Ukrainian military. Ukrainian military needed a lot of deep reforms. It really needed to have a lot more work done internally, specifically when there is like false reporting and so on. Recently, there has been another case of false reporting where some of the units have been reported being okay, whereas in reality, they were actually cut off with no logistics. And that was horrible, really made the news. And now Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief of Ukraine, has been actually rolling out now the demand that there will be maximum time for people at the forward positions, that it is now just up to 2 months, after which there is a mandatory request for rotation of these troops, and after they get rotated out, they also need to get some vacation time. This is a fantastic change. Now, obviously, there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of critiques. What I want to underscore here is the principle that there was something discovered in Ukrainian military, it was raised as a problem, then it was raised on to the level of the commander-in-chief, and action was taken with a decision that is benefiting inside of Ukrainian military to Ukrainian soldiers. So once again, there are changes in Ukrainian military, just they're slow. And a lot of critique is right now how this will be executed. There is a lot of workarounds. True. But again, the decision is there. There is basis for improvement. That is one thing. Second thing is long-awaited reform of the military has now been announced. President Zelensky, in his latest speech, has been talking about the upcoming reform of the Ukrainian military that has been long awaited. The first two major improvements in Ukrainian military is exactly what I was telling you about. A lot of the Ukrainian problems inside of their military can actually be solved by just increasing the salaries for the military. And this is what we are seeing. Firstly, there is an increase in salary for the people that are working to support Ukrainian military in the back. So now, if people will join the military to work in these back rank positions, even they will get somewhat of a decent salary, which opens the possibility for some other people to be then transferred to positions closer to the front line, and people that maybe are too scared and to go fight at the front line to still contribute to the military instead of evading that. Second, a special attention to infantryman that is fighting at the front line. President Zelensky stating that there needs to be a massive increase for people that are actually going into the heart of battle and risking their lives to protect the fatherland here. So he's stating that they need to get massive boost in their salaries up to 250 to 400,000 hryvnias a month, which is just a cosmic level salaries when you compare it to some other places. It is a very, very crucial boost, and definitely it helps solving a lot of problems of Ukrainian military, especially the desertion rate. A lot of people have been red herring stating that Ukrainians just don't have people to mobilize. That is not the case. There are plenty of people in Ukraine. It's just people are looking at the war, and so far, especially in 25, when Russians were advancing and there was this notion that Russia is just unstoppable, then suddenly, yeah, they don't want to go and risk it. But now, not only the situation is changing, perception of that situation is changing, and now there is now reform of the military stating, hey, you're also going to earn a lot more money if you join the military, and you can get a decent living. That's going to be a deal that a lot of people will reevaluate their approach to. Third, changes to the contracting within Ukrainian military. Specifically, there is discussion with regards to terms of contracts, essentially, so people don't just get conscripted to the military with no way out, but rather have contracts that they signed with a known end date. And there's going to be obviously discussions with regards to reform of mobilization, how mobilization is conducted, and overall, there is a lot of things that are being done, and I was waiting when this army reform is going to be announced publicly by the President Zelensky, and now it has. It's great to see that this reform is underway. This has been long awaited, and with the fact of the matter that it is Fedorov that is also in charge, who has shown great results, and a lot of the watchdogs have reported now on the first 100 days of Fedorov and stated that for a lot of places, they have seen stellar performance of him and a lot of his cabinet, and they're very happy. So I think Ukraine is in good hands, and there's a lot of internal improvements that Ukraine can do to overcome existing Russian problems. Guys, I've never been more optimistic for Ukraine in this war ever, and I hope you are feeling that as well. So let's continue doing our part. Participate in fundraiser. Remember, no matter what happens, every time we're supporting Ukraine, we're saving actual people's lives. Preserve more Ukrainian lives, support Ukraine, trust in Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.